talking to Vladimir Putin. Let's try and catch up on that, and be good to catch up on the latest talk of a ceasefire in Gaza. A lot to talk about on Times Radio.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio, the voice of the Times.
It's 6 o'clock. I'm John Pienaar. Welcome then to Pienaar and Friends, Sienna Rodgers, Adam Boulton, and you. It'd be really good to get your thoughts. Do join in. Send me a text. Send me a tweet. We're also live streaming the show on YouTube. You can see as well as listen in, but whatever you do, do join in. And we can all chat after the news with Andy Hayes.
Thank you, John. Good evening. Tributes are being paid by royalty, politicians and fellow star footballers to the Liverpool and Portugal player Diogo Jota. The striker and his brother were killed in a car crash in Spain just 11 days after he got married. Cristiano Ronaldo says it doesn't make sense, while former Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp says he's struggling with the news. He says there must be a bigger purpose, but at the moment he can't see it. The Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner was in Liverpool when the news broke. She's laid a bouquet of flowers at Anfield.
It's heartbreaking. It is absolutely heartbreaking, and just shows how life events can change really quickly. And, you know, I'm absolutely devastated for his wife and his children and his family. I can't imagine what they're going through at the moment. My son's 28, and it just, you know, it's really shocking.
The Chancellor has spoken for the first time since she was seen crying at Prime Minister's questions. Rachel Reeves says it was a personal matter and she's not going to share the details. The government wants to train more GPs at the expense of fewer hospital consultants under its 10-year plan for the NHS. Ministers also want to shift care out of hospitals and closer to home. Poppy Karonka, the Times' health correspondent, says the intention is to put a lot more information on the NHS app.
We've got potentially your genome sequenced and your genetic risk scores on the app. You've got data that could be put in from smartphones, so wearables, Apple Watches, stuff like that could be fed into the app. All of these things that are quite radical and forward thinking. I think it does perhaps lack on some of the detail on some of these proposals.
4 people have been remanded in custody after 2 Voyager aircraft were damaged at RAF Bryce Norton in a demonstration by members of Palestine Action. The defendants spoke only to confirm their names. A member of the House of Lords last seen swimming in a river in Wales has died. The body of 77-year-old David Lipsey was recovered on Tuesday. He was a journalist for both the Times and the Sunday Times. He also worked as a Downing Street advisor under James Callaghan in the 1970s. He was credited with coining the phrases New Labour and Winter of Discontent, although Shakespeare clearly played a part in that too. Novak Djokovic gave Britain's Dan Evans little hope of an upset as he thrashed him in straight sets in the second round of Wimbledon. He's chasing an 8th title, which would draw him level with Roger Federer's record. But Djokovic says that's not something that necessarily motivates him all the time.
I don't reflect fully on everything that I have been through. I would like to, but I think that's going to come probably when I set the racket aside and then sip margarita on the beach with Federer and Nadal and just reflect on our rivalry and everything.
And England's cricketers have finally bowled India out for 587 in their first innings on day 2 of the second test. Shoaib Bashir took 3 wickets at Edgbaston. Opposition captain Shubman Gill made 269. And for a news bulletin when you want it, search for the Times News Briefing on the Times Radio app.
Across the UK, on DAB Digital Radio, on the Times Radio app, and on your smart speaker.
Pienaar and Friends on Times Radio with Barclays Business Banking.
It's good to have you with us on Pienaar and Friends, an hour of good conversation in good company. Tonight, that is Sienna Rodgers, the Deputy Editor of the House Magazine at Westminster. Hi, Sienna. Good to see you.
Hello, good to see you.
Adam Boulton's here too. Good to see you, Adam.
Good evening, John.
And a reminder, we are now on YouTube if you want to watch us as well as listen in. And do remember, send us your thoughts. Send me a text, 87222. Stop with the word Times or a tweet to @Times Radio, or maybe a voice note on WhatsApp on 0333 003 2353. Tell us what you're thinking in your own words, in your own way. Join in the conversation. Now, I'll just ask you first, Adam, what's your thought for the day?
My thought for the day is what makes people cry. I mean, because everyone is different. And obviously we don't really know what the personal matter was that affected the Chancellor. I wasn't really thinking about her. I was thinking about myself, and I do occasionally cry. And oddly, the things that make me cry are gratitude, when someone really expresses great gratitude to someone for what they've done. And I have to admit, I am a bit sentimental. I think parents with young children, when they're sort of walking along the street and things like that, I find that very often quite touching. What makes you cry?
What makes me cry? I mean, I suppose I'm as open to the odd little welling up as anybody else. I mean, maybe the same sort of things that make other people well up a little bit. Just news of something really, really moving. I mean, you see scenes in the news which are very often, and occasionally that it would be right off it didn't touch you, and sometimes it will touch you.
I just feel
very, very
Season Observers doesn't do it for me.
Never.
However,
you see a scene of that we're almost, maybe in your case, genuinely sort of inured to it all, but we see scenes which it would be impossible not to be deeply moved by. The scenes of theatres of war, of devastation, and now we see them in such, and we always have, but maybe more so now, more immediately and more often now, in such vivid detail. It's impossible not to, from time to time, to identify with it.
I mean, when David Amess was murdered, I was reporting from his constituency, and actually what moved me there was the genuine affection of the people coming in, to pay tribute to him the day after his death.
Yeah. What about you, Sienna? What moves you so?
For me, it's stories about children. And even before I had a child, I think those are the things that really affect me. Any sort of child abuse case, like this case about this child who's killed at a nursery, that just really gets me going. Yeah. And Christmas adverts.
Christmas, of course. Well, obviously, how could anyone not sob their eyes out through the entire range of Christmas
even the
adverts?
rubbish ones, I just immediately cry.
Yeah. Now, what's your thought for the day, Sienna?
My thought for the day is something I've been thinking about this week. Is just the way that Labour backbenchers in particular, but backbenchers are completely taking control at the moment. And when this government came in, this huge majority, everyone, I mean, I certainly assumed the main kind of news, the legislative stuff, would be the government driving through its agenda. It's got a big majority, it can get anything through. That'll be the exciting stuff going through the Commons. And actually, the biggest things, there's not only the welfare rebellion that we saw this week and that kind of obvious example of them taking control and sort of ripping up the bill during the debate right up to the vote, which was extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it. It felt like we were going back to the Brexit wars days. It was incredible. But also assisted dying, decriminalising abortion, these huge societal changes that actually this government might become known for. That might really be its legacy, especially if it's a one-term Labour government. And it's coming from Labour backbenchers who are actually, arguably you could say, using the Labour majority better than the government is.
Yes.
But there's also an awful lot of them. That's the other thing, isn't it, with not really much prospect of getting very far up the career ladder. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, not all of them can be ministers, although after the rebellion, one backbench MP was saying, yes, I'm going to be a minister, rubbing their hands, less competition.
Good luck with that. I mean, you're right, big majorities, great stacks of MPs on whoever it is, particular sides of the House, does give ministers and the whips, the arm twisters and persuaders, a certain sense of security. But equally, as you say, you can look at it from the other way. It's a license to express your mind. When you lose your fear of the whip, and they've learned that in numbers there is strength. Yeah. I mean, there's no point in threatening to take the whip away from a rebellion when you're dealing with even a couple of dozen MPs, let alone 80, 90, 100 and 120. You can form a square like infantry on the field of Waterloo, and no one is going to get you. And then beyond all of that, I suppose there is the habit phenomenon where you do it once, you realise you can do it again, and you get used to the idea of thinking for yourself. Which the point of a whip to a new member turning up at Westminster is to sort of drill it out of them as quickly as possible. Turn up when you're told, read the whip, turn in, vote, go away again, and that's your job done.
And these veteran Labour MPs were getting really frustrated with the newbies because they were saying things like, oh, I want to give this speech or I want to make this point, but I'm just running it by the whips first. And they were going, no, you don't have to do that. That's not how it works. Like they've convinced you that you have to be that loyal and that subservient, but you don't have to be. And they're trying to tell them this. And I think basically the penny dropped with this rebellion once those veterans came out, those kind of even select committee chairs came out and openly rebelled against the government. That was kind of proof that, yeah, you can kind of do whatever you want. And it certainly, if you think you're going to lose your seat, if you think you're not going to make ministerial rank, then you may as well.
Well, let's talk about what's been a torrid week for the government, for the Prime Minister, certainly for the Chancellor. I mean, this morning we saw them trying to draw a line. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor, obviously in particular, trying to draw a line under what we all saw in the House of Commons yesterday after a grim couple of days before all of that. And the Prime Minister, he turned up in this building just a couple of floors from where we are now, talking to Chris Evans on Virgin Breakfast. Have a listen.
I actually personally didn't even appreciate it was happening in the chamber, because I came in and I've got questions being fired at me and PMQs, and so I'm sort of constantly up at the dispatch box and down. But I think we just need to be clear. It's a personal matter, and I'm not going to breach Rachel's privacy by going into what's a personal matter for her.
As the Prime Minister on Chris Evans' show, and the message was the same at a news conference later on, where he didn't notice, he simply didn't see Rachel Reeves sitting in the seat next to his on the front bench crying in floods of tears. He was so engrossed in the business of taking questions, looking around for the next one, reading his brief and jumping up and down. There was still a view that he might have been a bit more fulsome in supporting the Chancellor's job prospects than he was on the day, and he certainly sounded more that way this morning. As for Rachel Reeves, but what could she do today after all of that, except try to get across the message that she was over it, and she was there, and she'd carry on doing her job.
I totally am. This is the job that I've always wanted to do. I'm proud of what I've delivered as Chancellor. Look, I think all of your viewers have had tough days for personal reasons, for whatever reasons. I happened to be on the camera when I had a tough day, but today is a new day and I'm just getting on with the job.
So that's Rachel Reeves earlier. And I caught up on the show earlier too with Ruth Jones, one of those Labour MPs who's one of the chairs of the committees at Westminster. She had previously voted against the welfare reforms, and then she voted with it for the government line after the concessions that were rapidly, hastily made. And she, talking to me, wanted to cut Keir Starmer some slack in the face of that criticism. He's been out of touch with his own backbenchers and yesterday with his Chancellor's emotions.
As Prime Minister, he's had a lot to deal with. He's been on the world stage. We've got Ukraine, we've got the Middle East, we've got USA. We've got an awful lot of things where he's got to be out on the stage. And he is a very, very good statesman. He represents the UK very, very well. It's hard. You can't keep all the balls in the air. So it's important that his ministers are out and about. And to be fair, his ministers have been out and about listening to us in the last week or so.
On the Prime Minister and the way that he handled things yesterday, she said it was partly down to his character.
I think you've got to take into account his personality. He's not Boris Johnson, and that's the reason he's our leader, because he's not Boris Johnson. He's not one of those who shouts his mouth off. He's considered, he's respectful, he's calm and collected. And in politics, people want you to wear your heart on your sleeve. And I don't think that's a good thing for a Prime Minister or the leader of the Labour Party to be doing.
Right, and then I spoke to Karen Smith, the secondary care minister, who had a similar defence of the Prime Minister.
Well, look, I've worked with Keir. I was his PPS in the early days of Brexit days. I've worked with him really closely on the Northern Ireland brief that I covered and in this brief. He is a really decent man. He doesn't entertain the sort of briefing against anyone. He's very loyal with his team, and that is the measure of the man. And he is 100% focused on the country, and that's what the rest of us should be doing as well.
So it was the sound of government ministers and loyalists drawing the wagons into a circle, a protective circle around the Chancellor and the Prime Minister. We'll get Sienna and Adam's thoughts on all of that in just a moment here on Pienaar and Friends with Barclays Business Banking. Grow your business. Bank on Barclays.
To learn more, visit aboutamazon.co.uk/sustainability.
Download the free Times Radio app from the App Store or Google Play today.
Pienaar Friends on Times Radio with Barclays Business Banking. Grow your business. Bank on Barclays.
Now, let me just bring you this bit of news. A ban on Palestine action is now set to become law after peers in the House of Lords supported moves to prescribe the group as a terrorist organisation. That piece of news just in. And on Capitol Hill in Congress, Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House of Representatives, is just under 15 minutes away from breaking the record for speaking in the House. And we will cross over to Washington to mark that when the time comes, as well as other things that are going on there, maybe things of even greater significance than that. Elizabeth Devereux has written in. Thanks, Elizabeth. She says, John cries when Crystal Palace loses. I can only say, well, I've been tumbled. Thanks for that, Elizabeth. We're talking about the Prime Minister and the Chancellor in their own ways trying to draw a line, if they can. They won't ever call what happened today anything like a reset, but in some ways it sort of was. And Adam and Sienna, where the Prime Minister is concerned, he doesn't he, have genuine questions over him about his instinct and his empathy and his grip.
He's always struggled with his political instincts and struggled with party management. It's been a problem since day one of his leadership. Even when Labour were in opposition, MPs would say, and there weren't many of them back then, I still haven't met Keir, I'm not convinced he knows my name. And now his own Starmerite intake from last year, the MPs, some of them saying the same thing. He tried to do some outreach with these lunches. Some of the MPs just said that they didn't feel like he was still being attentive enough in those. There is also other opinions within the PLP. Obviously, there are also loyalists in the PLP who say, actually, my colleagues are, whining, and he should be, one of them said, he should be speaking to Trump, not in the effing tea room with me. Like, there is a diversity of opinion in the parliamentary party, but I do think it's a consistent problem with Keir Starmer that he is not maybe as emotionally intelligent as some people would like him to be sometimes. And some people thought that, I think that in that PMQ session, he probably should have, maybe he didn't realise what was going on, that she was full on crying, etc., because he is doing this extremely difficult thing where you could see even Kemi Badenoch as well, she was shaking the whole time. She always does during PMQs. It's obviously a really highly stressful situation, so they concentrated on that. But surely at the end of the session, giving her a hug, it's something. I feel like something could have been done differently there. It's something that he needs to work on, but I feel like particularly the party management side of things, MPs are complaining about not just Starmer's own behaviour in this sense, but also his staff. And there may be some changes coming up. I wouldn't be surprised if they did change some of the people in number 10 in order to improve that operation in terms of party management.
Sienna, you sounded there a moment ago like someone who might have heard something.
Well, there are so many complaints at the moment, particularly about Claire Reynolds. Now, I she can't speak for herself because she is a staffer, but people are calling for a change to be made there. And I wouldn't be surprised if that did happen.
What's her job?
She is, God, I'm forgetting her job title now, but basically it's PLP relations. She's responsible for that party management that clearly went so wrong last week and earlier this week.
There's been a lot of chatter about Morgan McSweeney, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. And he seems to be going out of his way still to saying, look, he's off limits, leave him alone. And I don't think that Morgan McSweeney, who has been so crucial to making Keir Starmer Labour leader, to making him Prime Minister, he's an expert on campaigning, and perhaps at some point he will go back to Labour HQ to focus on the campaigning side of things again. I wouldn't be surprised to see that either, but I still think that there's no way that he's not appreciated, because he does give so much to the government, and I think if there is a part of the government that's not working, it's not Morgan McSweeney. Okay, look, the Prime Minister, Adam, one definition of sophistication is knowing what to say, when to say it, and how to say it. To say the right thing at the right time in exactly the right way. And by that test, Keir Starmer, at least in public, I'm not suggesting he lacks decency as a human being, but he is profoundly unpolitically sophisticated.
Yeah, he or spontaneous. He doesn't.
You can be both.
He doesn't really have genuine warmth, and even at the news conference today, he reminded everyone that, his mother had worked in the National Health Service, and you really thought, come on, we've had enough of your parents, frankly. And what was it? Glassman this morning said Keir Starmer was doing fine until he went to university. It made him stupid. Lord Glassman was saying that. I think there is a real problem, and I know because I've been getting lots of attacks on social media that everyone's saying, oh, it's just the media, and why do you focus on this and leave her alone and all that. It was a really ugly scene yesterday. And frankly, today's performance, if you're following those things closely, really did nothing to dispel it. I mean, it was awkward that Beth Rigby stood up, asked the Prime Minister a question and asked the Chancellor a question after the Chancellor had been produced unexpectedly at this news conference. And Keir Starmer answered the question for her. And then they had to rethink, and she did that clip saying, worst cliche of all, I'm cracking on. I mean, the reality is, for those people following these things closely, and there is lots and lots of reporting now about unhappiness within the parliamentary party and tensions within the government, and lots of, unattributable quotes around that, this government is really struggling. They don't feel that Keir Starmer knows where he's leading them. Yeah. They don't feel that he's good. Even when he is taken to the tea room, he just tells everybody, I met Trump last week and it's really busy. He doesn't actually talk to them about themselves. And there is clearly now a big economic problem, which is that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer set off to do one thing, and the government has not been strong enough to stick to that path of restoring financial stability. The public, the markets clearly trust her more than him yesterday, and that's what we saw. So that, in a sense, is good for her. But he's inclined to give way to sort of soft left instincts. It's done repeatedly. And I'm still getting over all those articles he did marking 1 year where he apologised for policies that he had said were, moral necessities, and absolutely right. Because, all prime ministers have to change their course, but they don't have to say I was wrong. They might say I couldn't achieve that. Yeah. And so I think there is a real funk, really, at the heart of this government. And I don't think it's gone away by, Rachel Reeves being put out there to say, everything's all okay, what are you worrying about? And there's going to be a continuing suspicion. I know it's a private matter, but until that private matter, people understand at least what that private matter is, a lot of people are going to think that's just an excuse for the fact that she had a big bust up with the Prime Minister.
Yeah, or was just generally feeling the intense pressure that she was under.
But it was political. We're told it's not political. There's this mysterious exterior, non-political private matter. And I just think the scepticism will continue about that.
Yeah, I don't think anyone buys the stress of this week with these extraordinary scenes in the Commons and her headroom being reduced even more to absolutely nothing, no savings made from that welfare bill. I don't think anyone buys that wasn't affecting her at that moment. That's just not credible. But I do think that Rachel Reeves is more likely than not safe. I mean, ultimately...
I agree with that. I find it impossible to see her going unless she herself decides at some future point, whenever that may or may not come, that she can no longer endure it. Right now, you would not predict
I disagree.
You think she might be sacked?
I don't know what's going to happen. I think she could walk away. I don't know.
But I'm saying she would need that.
Well, yeah, but this reminds me, and John, you were there too, of after Black Wednesday 1992, when John Major stuck by his personal friend Norman Lamont after the Black Wednesday and all the rest of it, and the reality was that in the end it drew a wedge between them, and the government felt a need that needed to relaunch, and it was the Chancellor who paid the price. I mean, I just think that I'm not saying it's going to happen now, but maybe 18 months. And I do think in that you have to say it is significant that for all his support yesterday, when challenged by the leader of the opposition, the Prime Minister did not repeat what he had said repeatedly before, that she was going to be there until the general election. Now, I know he sort of gabbled it today and say she's going to be there for the general election and beyond, sort of Buzz Lightyear style. But, I mean, you know, he can't commit whether she's going to be there beyond. That's in the hands of the voters.
Yeah. Look, I mean, on the Lamont major comparison, there was a difference in view, a big one, but they weren't on the same page. I mean, unlike now, where Starmer and Reeves are absolutely joining the hip.
Do we know that Rachel Reeves thought the right thing to do was to back down to the extent they backed down?
I'm referring.
She didn't.
Well, okay. I'm referring. Well, you think there was a difference over that Starmer was in favour of going ahead and risking a defeat on the bell?
No, that she might have been more in favour of actually saying, you know, the position is that we've got to make cuts and they're going to be painful, and he kicked the legs out from under her.
I think that's probably true, considering what we know about Angela Rayner being the one to stick up for the backbenchers.
Yeah. At the same time, it was coming from everywhere. That had they gone ahead with that vote, they could have lost it, which would have been catastrophic.
A braver leader would have had a vote. Maybe he would have had without making further concessions. Maybe after the initial concessions were made, he would have then said, "Let's have a vote," because that is how, you know, to the point earlier on about the power of backbenchers. At some point, you have to confront them.
Yeah. My central point was, I do not see her leaving unless she chooses to, because that would be disastrous for the government. It would be disastrous also for Starmer.
Yeah.
If she were to come and say, this is a pure hypothesis, which I do not predict. If she comes at some point in the future and says, "I've got to go," he would be mandated to say, "No, you cannot." She would have to insist. And if he were to be, I'd argue, misguided enough as to encourage her to go, he would be in a comparable position to Liz Truss and Kwasi. To lose her would be take him to within the very brink of his own personal disaster. That's certainly how I'd argue.
Do you think she's going to be Chancellor at the next election?
That's not what I'm saying. First of all, I'm not saying I can see 4 years into the future. Politics can change and will over that period of time. But as far as anyone I think can see, I stand by that view of things. Let me just bring this in now, because this is something which is now happening as well, not before our eyes, but before the eyes across the Atlantic, because we now have a new record on Capitol Hill. Hakeem Jeffries, leader of the Democrats, there has now been speaking for more than 8 hours and 32 minutes. He's been trying to hold up the Donald Trump big, beautiful bill, which he's still doing, so we're going to listen in.
Take your time. Ripping food away from children, literally. Ripping food out of the mouths of hungry children. Hungry veterans and hungry seniors. Mr. Speaker, that's not America. We're better than that.
So applause there for the Democratic leader in the House of Representatives, Hakeem Jeffries. I'm not sure whether that was for the force of the argument there, or maybe they just were looking at their watches and saw that he crossed the line. The line being set by Kevin McCarthy in 2021 when he spoke continuously for 8 hours and 32 minutes. He was protesting Joe Biden's signature domestic policy legislation. So just a moment, not a huge one, but a moment there in American political history. And we're going to be talking after the news about the big, beautiful bill, which at least in scale is vastly, vastly bigger than what's going on over here. As important as what's going on over here certainly is. I mean, I don't know what that comparison, Adam and Sienna, really does for us, because what's going on here is big enough, for us to contemplate. But what's going on over there, we are constantly reminded, is just something vaster and stranger.
But it's the reverse, in a sense, because it's a very dominant president basically bulldozing his way through everybody, including his own party, including both houses of Congress, to get his way on the big, beautiful bill, as it used to be called, which most independent views are that it will make things a good deal worse for most Americans. It will transfer money from the poor to the rich through the tax system. It will cut back on healthcare safety nets, on Medicaid. It cuts back on, as we were just hearing there, food stamps for the poor. And yet, even though there was some resistance by Republicans within both the Senate and the House, in the end, guess what? Donald Trump's had his way, or is having his way.
Yeah, well, which is the thought which is sustaining the Democratic Party right now in D.C. and around the United States. They think that this bill is going to be a game changer. They think the hits of welfare, including Medicaid, food stamps, and so on, the fact that the tax cuts disproportionately benefit the well-off to the extent that they do, will help them get in so much better shape by midterm elections.
What he appears to be calculating is the vastly increased defence spending, and particularly the extra money for ICE, the people who are handling the deportations of so-called illegal immigrants, that will mobilise his base and satisfy them in a way that, you know, the incidental economic issues, he reckons, you know, will be not things that will predominate in their concerns.
And the Republicans' sort of ideological conviction that these tax cuts are going to stimulate the economy and we're going to have growth in America, which will, they believe, help them win.
Yeah, the big issue,
winning the argument.
The big issue for the Republicans, of course, is increasing the deficit. This is definitely going to increase the deficit, which, you know, I know the dollar's a reserve currency, but the American deficit is worse than our deficit. And, you know, in the end, a lot of classical economists will say it will end in tears.
Yeah, some say by more than $3.3 trillion over 10 years. So a Republican would say, no, nothing of the kind. The economy is going to grow. It's going to go exactly the other way. But that's the shape of the argument from here on in. I guess from tonight on, to say nothing of Elon Musk. Is he going to carry out his threat now? The bill's on its way to becoming law. Is he going to carry out his threat of starting his own party? Or is he taking his money away from the GOP and the Donald Trump cause? So much there to talk about. We're going to do that right after the news. I do want to mention this, though, because today so many of us were struck by the awfully sad news of the death in a car accident of Diogo Jota and his brother. Well, the coach of Liverpool, Arne Slot, has been putting out a statement. It says this. I'll repeat it to you. What to say, says Arne Slot. What can anyone say at a time like this when the shock and the pain is so incredibly raw? I wish I had the words, but I know I do not. All I have are feelings that I know so many people will share about a person and a player we love dearly and a family we care so much about. My first thoughts are not those of a football manager. They're of a father, a son, a brother and an uncle, and they belong to the family of Diogo and Andre Silva, who've experienced such an unimaginable loss. My message to them, says Arne Slot, is very clear. You'll never walk alone. It goes on to say, the last time we spoke, I congratulated Diogo on winning the Nations League and wished him luck for his forthcoming wedding. A reminder, Diogo Jota was married just 2 weeks ago, and Slot says in many ways it was a dream summer for Diogo and his family, which makes it all the more heartbreaking that it should end like this. So, that statement from Arne Slot, just a flavour of the emotion which has greeted that sad news of the death of that great Liverpool footballer. Now, it is now 6:33 here on Pienaar and Friends. Time for the news with Andy Hayes.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Well, we just heard from the current Liverpool manager. The former Liverpool manager, Jurgen Klopp, says he's heartbroken to hear of the death of Diogo Jota. The striker was killed in a car crash just 11 days after getting married. The 28-year-old Portuguese father of three was travelling with his brother Andre Silva in the Zamora province of northwestern Spain. Jota clinched the Premier League title with the Reds just a few weeks ago. Mayor of the Liverpool City region, Steve Rotherham, says it is devastating.
It's more of the human nature of this tragedy rather than what it means to football. Football will go on, it always does. But for that family, I mean, how do you get over the devastation of losing two sons, for instance, and three little kids losing a father?
Rachel Reeves says she's totally up for the job of Chancellor after she was seen crying during Prime Minister's questions yesterday. Sir Keir Starmer admitted he was the last to appreciate that she was in tears because PMQs is, quote, pretty wild. A member of the House of Lords last seen swimming in a river in Wales has died. The body of 77-year-old David Lipsey was recovered on Tuesday. He was a journalist for both The Times and The Sunday Times. He also worked as a Downing Street advisor under James Callaghan in the 1970s. He was credited with coining the phrases New Labour and Winter of Discontent, although Shakespeare clearly played a part in that as well. And for a roundup of the news on demand, subscribe to The Times News Briefing on any podcast platform.
This is Times Radio.
Banking. Find out how Barclays can help to move your business forward. Search Barclays Business.
And here with me on Pienaar and Friends, Sienna Rodgers from the House Magazine at Westminster, and Adam Boulton. We're joined by Caroline Quinn, who takes over at 7, sitting in for Kate Borsay. How do you see Caroline?
Hello, John. Yes, well, we're asking the question, of course, that you've been asking, which is, why did she cry? Rachel Reeves. Nobody really knows, do they? Was it really a personal issue? She was out there today putting on her best face, and lots of friendly hugs from Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting, but still the questions go on. So we will be discussing that. Oliver Wright from The Times will be giving us the theories that are running around in Westminster at the moment. And we'll be talking about this whole thing about reputational management and how do you restore credibility with Joe Tanner and Michael McManus, who've both been in the business and both worked with big figures in the parties over the years. We're going to be looking at the 10-year health plan for the NHS, with the King's Fund giving their view, along with you paying tribute to Diego Jota after that awful car crash that has killed him and his brother. Newly married, 3 little kids, those beautiful pictures of them at their wedding. The big, beautiful bill in Washington. Well, it is still big, isn't it? And Donald Trump thinks it's beautiful, but some Republicans don't quite agree. They think it's pretty ugly, don't they? And Hakeem Jeffries, you've been talking about this, he is still going as he tries to slow down the progress of that bill. They really think that it shouldn't get through. It probably will get through, but records are being broken right now. So by 7 o'clock, who knows what might have happened? But we'll be looking at this, and also we are coming up to the 20th anniversary of 7/7. Do you remember that awful day when there were the tube attacks? There were so many people that died, so many that were injured, and there was an aftermath that ran on for weeks, which culminated in the mistaken identity killing of Jean-Charles de Menezes. London was in absolute turmoil. I'm sure we all remember those days, worry about getting on the tube after what happened. There were the tube attacks and a bus bombing. 4 suicide bombers were killed in their attacks. There were some foiled and failed attacks just a week later. And then, of course, the Jean-Charles de Menezes shooting by the Metropolitan Police. So we'll be talking to an author and documentary maker, Jim Nally, who is marking the anniversary with a new book called 3 Weeks in July. He will be joining me live just after 9 o'clock tonight.
Okay, lots coming up with you, Caroline, after this show. Good to see you. Looking forward to that. Now, here on Pienaar and Friends, let's do what we said we were going to do and cross the Atlantic. I presume Hakeem Jeffries is still doing what he's doing, or has he decided he's made his point? No, he's still going strong. I'm being told he doesn't want to break the record. He wants to make a point. Maybe just get a bit more attention for his side of the argument, on the Democrat side of the argument, because, well, the bill looks like it's going to go through, doesn't it? But it's going to be the beginning of a whole fresh argument. Molly Ball, our colleague, the senior political correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, is on the line. Hello, Molly.
Hello, John.
Hi. So, I mean, it's all going to carry on, and it's going to kick off maybe with a kind of new energy. I'm told that Hakeem Jeffries is about to sit down, no doubt to a round of applause from his own side of the House of Representatives. But Molly, I mean, Hakeem Jeffries has made his point, and it is fair to say that a lot of his party, the Democrats, they think this bill is going to give them stuff to work with, don't they?
That's right. The legislative fight is coming to an end over this massive bill, but the political fight is only beginning. I'm looking at the feed from the chamber right now, and Jeffries has in fact stepped off the dais, the place from which he was speaking, and as you said, he was greeted by applause from his fellow Democrats after setting a record and speaking for nearly 9 hours. But both parties are going to now have to take this argument to the American people. You know, the public polling that we've seen so far shows that this is a massively unpopular bill, but also that most Americans don't have a very strong sense of what it is and what it does and what all is in it. Yeah. And some individual provisions are themselves popular. So you're going to see the Republicans and the Democrats take this argument to the people, and, you know, the Democrats making the argument, as Jeffries has just done for a quite long time, that this is going to, you know, kick millions of people off of their health care and blow up the deficit, all for the cause of giving massive tax breaks to the rich, and Republicans pointing to the tax cuts in the bill, and Trump saying, you know, this is going to supercharge the economy and cause massive growth and lead to the golden age that he is fond of proclaiming. So which side of that argument Americans believe as they start to see this bill take effect, and as they hear more about it in the coming months, could be the key to which party wins the next election.
Right, and as understanding of what the bill is grows, as well as watching the effect of the bill as time goes by. I'm struck by you saying, Molly, that an awful lot of people, it's not widely perceived to be fully understood. When you're looking at a piece of legislation where, on some estimates, nearly 12 million Americans will lose their right to medical insurance under the changes to Medicaid, and the tax cuts will benefit the top fifth of Americans by 2.3%. If you earn over $3 million a year, that's worth $120,000 a year. And if you're in the poorest, you could lose $500 a year. Say some estimates, when you take into account the cuts in benefits and welfare. When you've got stakes so stark as that, Molly, it's striking that the debate isn't more widespread and more heated at this point.
Well, I would say a couple of things. First of all, these tax cuts are already in place. This is about a continuation of the tax cuts that Trump and the Republicans passed in 2017, which were themselves rather unpopular, and which the Democrats complained about in the 2018, campaigned against in the 2018 midterms. But had the Republicans done nothing, those tax cuts would have expired and everyone's taxes would have gone up. Yeah. So rather than giving a new tax cut, this is about continuing a tax cut that was already in place. And Republicans have long been opposed to welfare programs in general. Medicaid, which is the health insurance program for the poor, was massively expanded under the Obama administration as part of the Affordable Care Act, and Republicans have long been opposed to that. There's a lot of concern, though, among Republicans that this will drive hospitals out of business, that particularly in rural areas, which are largely represented by Republicans, and particularly for those poor and working class populations, which we have seen increasingly move to the Republican Party in the Trump era, that this could cause a lot of pain. Trump has many times vowed not to take anything from Medicaid, but the Republicans claim that all they are doing is changing the eligibility to eliminate illegal immigrants and able-bodied non-working adults from the program. You know, illegal immigrants were already ineligible for Medicaid. So I think it remains to be seen whether and how people are actually going to feel this. Another thing I would say is a lot of these cuts are not going to take effect for some time, potentially for a couple of years.
Yeah, it is a big part of the Republican argument. We heard it in a they called it facts and myths, a big statement from the White House the other evening, saying that a huge proportion of people receiving food aid were single men of able body who, should they argued, have been working and needed to be, well, spurred on to work. It's the essence of the sort of welfare argument, which is, distilled again in this bill. Just mention this: Hakeem Jeffries, as I say, he passed the sort of record a few moments ago, having spoken for 8 hours and 33 minutes or so, 32 minutes. That broke the record. Here's the moment for connoisseurs of these things.
We're going to press on. We're going to press on for our children, press on for our seniors, press on for our veterans, press on for our unions, press on for our farmers, press on for our dreamers, press on for working class Americans, press on for the middle class, press on for all who aspire to be part of the middle class, press on for the poor, press on for the sick, press on for the afflicted, press on for the least, press on for the lost, press on for the left behind, press on for the rule of law, press on for the American way of life, press on for democracy. We're going to press on until victory is won.
So that's Hakeem Jeffries. At the moment of breaking the record, maybe I thought for a moment they're trying to break the number of different causes. He was prepared, and the others were going to press on in the next stage of the political battle. So Molly Wall from the Wall Street Journal is here with us. Adam Boulton, Sienna Rodgers too. Afterwards, I think we may be joined by Amanda Renteria, the National Political Director for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign in 2016. Get a sense of the thinking on that Democrat side of the aisle. This is Pienaar Friends here with Barclays Business Banking. Find out how Barclays can help move your business forward. Search Barclays Business.
Daryl.
Sienna Rodgers is here, so is Adam Boulton and Molly Wall from the Wall Street Journal. Always great to have you, Molly. Sienna.
Hi, Molly. I wanted to ask you about this row between Trump and Elon Musk, which has flared up again. And obviously, Trump says that really the thing that Musk is annoyed about is the EV mandate issue. Do you know what the kind of polling is around kind of the feeling of the American people around that? Are they on Trump's side or on Musk's side on that? And kind of more broadly, do you think this threat that Elon is, he's saying he's starting a new party, etc., is going to unseat these Republicans, everyone who votes for the big, beautiful bill? Is it a real worry to Trump at all, or is it a bit of a damp squib? Because, perhaps he could be removed from Tesla or all these kind of things. What do you think the real threat is there?
It's a great question. On the EV, it's not really an EV mandate, it's a subsidy. And I think there's some disagreement about whether Musk really favored it or whether it even was available to Tesla buyers. But Musk has, said that his opposition to the bill is because it spends too much. And we've seen him become a quite vocal opponent of government spending. And we had the whole Doge drama at the opening of the Trump administration 6 months ago. But Elon has been mostly quiet about the bill as it has gone through to final passage over the past week. He raised a lot of concerns for a while there, and last week said that they should all hang their heads in shame and that he was going to run primary candidates against all of them if it was the last thing he did. But then he sort of went quiet about it. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty about what he plans to do. At one point, he said he wanted to start a new political party. But again, we haven't seen him take any concrete steps in that regard. Certainly, if you are the Trump White House, you would rather have Musk in the tent than out of it, rather have him spending money on your behalf than against you. But I think it's very, very unclear, especially given the sort of flakiness that we know to be part of Musk's personality, whether he'll actually stick to that and what kind of interest he's going to have in politics when the rubber hits the road and elections start happening in earnest, a year from now. So the White House certainly not happy about Elon being such a vehement critic, but it hasn't proved to be any sort of impediment, really, to the passage of this bill.
Yeah, says something that Elon Musk, or for the matter Donald Trump, not tweeting or Xing or truthing deafeningly for a day and a half counts as an eerie silence. Yeah. Adam Boulton.
Yeah, I just wonder, obviously it looks as if the bill's going to go through, although it's been amended in many ways. But do you think it has put strains that will probably get greater within the Republican Party about supporting Donald Trump and supporting his agenda? Because, we have seen more opposition from within the Republican Party than previously.
I don't think there is. I think there is pretty much unanimous agreement in today's Republican Party that they want to support Donald Trump's agenda. They just disagree about what should be in it. So you have a lot of fiscal conservatives saying, Trump wants to cut the deficit. He doesn't want to blow up the deficit like we're doing here. You have the moderates saying Trump said he was going to protect Medicaid, not cut Medicaid and shut down hospitals as we're doing here. So they are largely invoking the president to substantiate their objections. They are not couching these as criticisms of Donald Trump. In fact, earlier this week, we saw two of the last remaining members of Congress who were willing to criticize Trump even a little bit, Representative Don Bacon of Nebraska and Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, both of whom were considered moderates, at least in today's Republican Party. They both decided they would not seek re-election, and they both made the point that the sort of aperture for independence and centrism continues to shrink in Trump's Washington. But again, you don't see many critics of Trump in today's Republican Party. That ship has really sailed. I think in his first term, you had a party that was much more devoted to traditional conservative principles and trying to hold out for that definition of the party against Trump's rather idiosyncratic worldview. But at this point, it is Trump's party. He has taken ownership of it. And if you're still a Republican office holder at this point, it's because you've made your peace with that.
Okay, great to get your thoughts, Molly. I can now say that we are joined now by Amanda Renteria, the National Political Director for Hillary Clinton's presidential run in 2016, who's now Chief Executive of Code for America. Amanda, welcome to the programme.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very, very welcome. Let me ask you briefly. We've got Sienna and Adam here with me, Molly Ball on the line there from the other side of the Atlantic, where you are. The bill, the big beautiful bill, looks like it's on its way to becoming law. Is it going to be a game changer in your view? And taking into account that we've seen this bill is not popular, in some ways it has been particularly unpopular, but not necessarily to the benefit of the Democrat Party. Is this going to be a change in all of that?
Yes, I think we are going to start to see people really understand what kind of government services are provided. So for a long time in this country, I don't think we've educated people enough about the kind of services folks provide, like healthcare coverage, et cetera. And now, while this administration might want to tout this as a big, beautiful bill, they are now branding the next actions that are going to happen to people all across the country. And that is losing healthcare coverage, losing food assistance, energy assistance. Those kinds of things are kitchen table issues, and they make an enormous difference on what's happening on the ground, not just for people, but certain industries as well, that we are going to see a major shift in this country over the next couple of years, should these go into implementation.
Okay, Sienna, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I wanted to get your take on what's happened with the Democrats, because my understanding was the kind of base really wanted them to fight harder, and they would kind of disappeared in terms of the kind of fight against Trump, and that this filibustering sort of ensures that they're really taking the fight to Trump and making that visible. What is the feeling at the moment in the party?
I think what you're seeing is a real coalescing around this moment to really showcase the difference between the two parties. And that's what you're really seeing out there. And you are seeing Democratic elected officials at every level of government really talking, reaching out to the community with, I'd say for the first time in a long time, one voice. And it really is around Medicaid cuts, healthcare. What does it really mean to be in this country? And, you know, our party, the Democratic Party, is very much making sure people are okay, while you're seeing this bill give away tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans. And that distinction is going to be important, not just now, but for redefining the Democratic Party going forward.
Amanda, what about the border? Because the number of unlawful, undocumented migrants crossing the southern border has dropped so dramatically. There's the president boasting it's down to zero the other day, and there's no denying that. I guess it's true that the fall in the numbers crossing the border, it predates Donald Trump's presidency for sure, but the results are pretty clear to see now. That's going to count for him, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he will go back to that messaging, but it is virtually closed. I think what you're now beginning to see, though, across the country is that this administration is going after folks who are actually American citizens, looking at how they can change their status in order to hit the numbers he's hoping to tout in this administration. Because of the process they've had, they haven't been able to not only hit the numbers, but they've done it in such an inhumane way that you're beginning to see independents recognize that the implementation of how this administration works through sensitive, controversial policies is actually not what we want, or not what they wanted when they voted for this presidency.
Adam Boulton.
So what do you think this means for the midterm elections?
Well, you'll hear more and more of this across the country. People will start talking about the implications of this bill. Why is your healthcare hospital executive worried about making ends meet and keeping doors open? Why are clinics now seeing their closing in rural areas, particularly in red, lower income districts? You're going to see a lot more of on the ground. What does this now really mean for people? Because those same people aren't going to feel the effects of a major tax break or tax cut that the higher end Americans will feel. Now, the question's really going to be, how does industry react to this? What happens to our clean energy industry? What happens to a lot of these industries that were beginning to show up in healthcare? What does it mean to not only have this happen while the administration has also cut NIH grants and healthcare grants at the federal level? So we are seeing a massive shift in this country that will be very clear what this administration's priorities are, and more Americans will begin to see the negative impacts of everything this administration has done.
I mean, that's interesting. I mean, that would be a watershed, because what we have seen recently with the rise of MAGA in the United States and other groups in this country, that the populist message appears to be stronger very often with poorer voters than the direct economic self-interest message.
Yeah, and I think one of the messages that Trump had during the election is, hey, I'm a business guy, I know how to do this, and I will make sure you're in a better financial position than you are now. And that is proving not to be true. But people believed that at the time of the election. So as more and more of these policies began to affect people's bottom lines, their health, the assistance, their communities, it will become clearly evident of what kind of policies Trump and this party have had for the American people.
Okay, Amanda, just nearly running out of time, but do tell me this. I want to get Molly's thought briefly, if we can, in the moments we've got left. But I mean, can the Democrats really cut through, even in time for the midterms, unless you have a leader who really cuts it in the eyes of enough voters? And clearly that, it could be argued, is not Kamala Harris. That's got to be done, hasn't it?
Well, look, the Democrats already...
If I could get Amanda briefly, and then Molly.
Okay. I think the remaking of the party is happening from the ground up, and this will simply fire that process up even more and really inspire folks to come forward with perhaps a group of leaders. I don't actually believe you need one leader.
All right, lastly, your word on that, if we can, Molly.
I was just going to say it feels very much like the 2018 midterms when the message of the Democrats was that Trump had just passed a massive tax cut for the rich while trying to take away people's health care. But the main engine of the Democrats winning and taking the House in those 2018 midterms was simply that Trump was very unpopular and there was a widespread backlash to him. And so for that reason, they see the wind as being at their back this time as well.
All right, Molly, great to have you with us. Do come and join us again very soon. Thanks to you. Thanks to Amanda Renteria, and of course to Adam and Sienna in our happily crowded programme this evening. More coming up with Caroline Quinn. This is Times Radio.
Across the UK, on DAB digital radio, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio, the voice of the Times.
Thanks very much, John. It's 7 o'clock. This is the evening edition with Caroline Quinn sitting in tonight for Kate Borsay. Coming up, have two clear-eyed, stage-managed appearances drawn a line under the Chancellor's day from hell? Has Project Save Rachel helped to stop the speculation about her future? We'll bring some excellent analysis on this. We'll head stateside for the latest on Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill. We remember Diego Jota, plus your exclusive first look at some of the stories coming up on The Times. All that to come. First, here's the news headlines with Andy Hayes.